No. We're gonna talk about this right here.
How can I help you?
Well, for starters, you can get your stomach down here and give me a divorce.
I don't want her doing anything she's always done.
So go on Tuesdays.
Greetings, guests. Welcome to the Patriarchy, where we explore cinema classics fueled by predictive Hollywood programming and unpack how our favorite characters in cinema got egg all over their faces. I am your commentator, Dom, and tonight we're unpacking the enemies to lovers storyline. They say keep your friends close and your enemies even closer. Is this true for lovers too? A storyline played out in film and media as old as time, the examples to reference are infinite. This trope stretches as far back as the 1500s, where we see the clashing war of wit between Beatrice and Benedict in Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. And even before that, it's written in the Bible to love our enemies. In the early to mid-2000s, a lot of our favorite teen rom-coms featured some great and some not so great quarrelsome feuds turned romantic flings, like Josh and Cher in Clueless.
Josh.
Denise and Kenny in Can't Hardly Wait.
Oh, woman!
And Landon and Jamie from A Walk to Remember.
So I'll see you after school?
In your dreams.
I could go on and on. And you'd think that the storylines with fully grown adult characters would feature less toxic romances because these characters are much more mature and sensible enough not to get involved with a known nemesis. Nope, we get a plethora of those too.
I wanted it to be you so bad.
But what is it about this particular drama that makes it so damn relatable that it continues to play as the baseline for all of our favorite stories, both past and present? Today, I'll present to you my 3 reasons on why we love seeing adversaries fall hard for each other on the big screen. One reason why the enemies to lovers trope makes such a great storyline is due to the jam-packed tension that naturally occurs between 2 rivals. The levels of discord and plot are what make the story interesting, and this adversarial relationship often results in a very high conflict plot that pulls the audience into the drama without us actually experiencing and feeling all of the emotions that would occur if this drama were to unfold in real life. Let's be real, drama is a spectator sport, and entertaining is hell to watch. It keeps us on the edge of our seats, wondering what will happen next, what's he gonna do next, how's she going to respond. And this back and forth saga between adversarial love interests is what keeps us invested in seeing how things unfold. Otherwise, we just stop watching. One of my favorite enemies to lovers plot that showcases a fantastic amount of tension, both good and bad tension, is The Bodyguard. Now, I've been waiting for a reason to talk about The Bodyguard. Despite the bad reviews that this movie received, this 1992 romantic thriller starring Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston not only delivered us a catalog of amazing hit songs, but also this romantic drama delivered us a very twisted, chaotic, and high-tension romance that began with a lot of conflict and tension. And the plot continued to have a lot of strife throughout the film.
Bullshit, Si. You saw me. Farmer's making me into a f***ing lunatic.
The tension between Rachel, a mega superstar played by Whitney Houston, and her new bodyguard Frank, played by Kevin Costner, is immediate, as Rachel doesn't think anything is wrong with her current security or the flippant and carefree lifestyle that she enjoys, despite being ultra famous. And if you haven't seen The Bodyguard, it's kind of like Beyonce thinking that she can just roll up into a Panera Bread whenever she wanted to with no issue. This was Rachel's attitude. At the onset, Frank sees Rachel as this snooty diva, oblivious to the fact that her life is in danger. And Rachel sees Frank as an uptight and paranoid stick in the mud who's intruding on the free-spirited way in which she chooses to live her life. Rachel is defiant at every turn, and Frank, who didn't even really want that job from the start, threatens to walk away because of her attitude. The turning point where the two grow closer is when Rachel realizes Frank's value after he saves her from an out-of-control audience at one of her concerts. And after sleeping with her, Frank decides he can't continue romantically with Rachel because not only is it unprofessional, but this sexual relationship also compromises his ability to protect her.
I don't want her doing anything she's always done.
So go on Tuesdays.
This leads to the pair being at odds again, and she actively makes his job of protecting her much harder. The biggest takeaway from this, and I think this rings true for most enemies to lovers plots, is that the turning point occurs almost exclusively when one character, man or woman, finally realizes the value of the other. It's such a common and overly used, and in my humble opinion, often wrong saying that opposites attract. And in researching this video, I've actually come across a few studies that show evidence that opposites rarely attract. Although one study on Sage Journals titled Misconceptions About Psychology found that almost 80% of us believe in that very idea. It's the Disney movies, I'm telling you. And maybe that Paula Abdul song, but psychologist Arthur Aaron argued that people also have a need to grow and expand the self, and that one reason why we form relationships with others who are opposite of us is because we can assimilate some of those qualities of our partners, which promotes our own growth. Sure, not the worst idea that your partner is strong in areas where you lack or are weak. But that's more of a complementary relationship, not a full-blown opposites attract. Enemies to Lovers largely plays on the opposites attract narrative, with the characters often clashing in either social status, morals, views, or all of the above. Classic examples of this show up in She's All That and 10 Things I Hate About You.
If you're planning on asking me out again, you might as well just get it over with. Do you mind? You're kind of ruining this for me.
But I want to highlight the example in Stranger Than Fiction, the 2006 comedy drama starring Will Ferrell and Maggie Gyllenhaal. The characters of Harold and Anna are perfect, non-superficial examples of opposites attract. And we're not just talking about looks and popularity here, as in the direction of most teen rom-coms, but Harold and Anna are actually polar opposites in thought and sensibility. Harold is a very pragmatic, organized, by-the-book, routine-driven, kind of dull tax auditor for the IRS.
Every weekday for 12 years, Harold would tie his tie in a single Windsor knot, thereby saving up to 43 seconds.
Anna, on the other hand, is a creative, free-spirited, chaotic, law school dropout turned baker who initially demonizes Harold for simply doing his job of auditing her bakery.
Get bent! Tax man!
Tax man!
So the contention starts when Anna's being audited by the tax man because she only pays some of her taxes and in turn makes his job a living hell because she doesn't want to be taxed on agendas and policies that she doesn't believe in.
So, I didn't pay those taxes.
It's the artist and the scientist, or perhaps in this case, mathematician pairing. Two people initially at odds because they have very different world views. And while Anna rages on against the machine, Harold is kind of just really passive as he has other things that he's more worried about, like who's the voice in his head narrating his life. But the switch from foe to friend, or more than friends, happens when Harold acknowledges Anna's kind gesture of baking him cookies by bringing her flowers, which I thought was such a cute play on words.
I brought you flowers.
This switch occurs when both parties realize that they are being assholes and each takes steps to actively mend their previous actions. Again, seeing the value in others. My final reason that the enemies to lovers trope is so popular and beloved is because in most cases we can expect to see a happy ending. We know it's coming, and sometimes a film like La La Land may crush that expectation.
I'm always gonna love you.
always gonna love you too.
But for the most part, we can see from the beginning how it's going to end. And that's because they all end with the characters falling for each other in some way. Humans rarely like being surprised, even if it's pure fiction. Like, there are full forums of fans that complain about how shows and movies end. And whether the feelings between the two characters on screen developed as sort of a crescendo or a gradual buildup, or if those feelings come as a sudden epiphany, knowing that an unlikely match will fall for each other despite their start gives us all some sense of hope, right?
How can I help you?
Well, for starters, you can get your stubborn ass down here and give me a divorce.
In 2002, Melanie and Jake, still legally married, but now worlds apart, find their way back to each other. Melanie, a fashion designer in New York, is forced to revisit her southern past in Alabama when her estranged husband, Jake, refuses to sign divorce papers so that she can remarry. Melanie and Jake, besides growing up together, are now on completely different paths as Melanie realizes her big city dreams and Jake continues to plant roots in his hometown.
You've turned into some hoity-toity Yankee.
This plot has the tension with Melanie's multiple attempts to aggravate Jake into signing the divorce papers and Jake's retaliatory responses to her antics. This plot also has the theme of opposites attract, a self-made big city girl and country boy. And it has what we all want, a happily ever after. Melanie does find her way back to Jake, and it's also not such a bad deal because Jake actually bettered himself for her. These happily ever afters provide us with the comfort that even with our sworn enemies, somehow things will all work out in our favor.
You're shitting me, right?
The enemies to lovers trope overall emphasizes that love can be found in the most unlikely of places or people. Enemies to lovers, no matter how prevalent in the stories and films that we consume though, is a fairy tale. And we should continue to treat it as such, because I'm willing to bet that in real life, relationships that begin and continue on with so much adverse tension and conflict rarely ever prove to be anything other than toxic. And we don't do toxic anymore. Now, let's talk about how the enemies to lovers fairy tale trope is so harmful. It's harmful because it's so commonplace, it's cliche, it's very repetitive. And what happens when things are repetitive? What happens when rom-coms targeted towards teenage girls like this?
My bet? My bet? Am I a f***ing bet?
Yes.
And fairy tales targeted towards little girls like this one.
You will join me for dinner. That's not a request.
Are fed to us over and over and over again, all before our frontal lobe gets fully developed. You got it, programming. It's the same story, different characters. Let's read this article titled The Power of Repetition, Reprogram Your Subconscious Mind by Pradeep Bhatt. Your subconscious mind, like a colossal library, continually absorbs information. In this complex repository, repetition serves as the diligent librarian, ensuring that the most critical information is prominently archived. When we come across repeated stimuli, be it a phrase, a tune, or an image, or a storyline, our brain begins to create neural pathways reinforcing our memory. Neuroscientists have ventured deep into the intricacies of our brain, uncovering the captivating interplay between repetition and memory. Repetition triggers a phenomenon known as long-term protonation, where the connections between neurons become stronger and stronger. The more that we repeat something, the more our brain deems it important, etching it into the very fabric of our subconscious. What are your thoughts on the topic? And also drop some of your favorite enemies to lovers films in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you've enjoyed the content. Signing off now, your friend, Dom.